asks for your hand in marriage. A Royal Alternate Universe Percy Jackson Fanfiction, Part 3. The next week, Percy was pulling at his collar in discomfort. Annabeth had practically forced him into formal wear. "Percy, stop doing that," she hissed at him. Percy pouted at her and huffed. "I don't like this," he complained, words melting together into a heap. Annabeth rolled her eyes. "I can tell. You will be fine. It is only for a couple of hours, and Princess Hazel is a very kind princess," she said. Percy gave her a nervous nod. Indeed, he had heard good things about Princess Hazel, second-born daughter to King Hades. Everyone knew she was a fair maiden, pure and sweet, and she was also wise beyond her years, not only being 17, but having the knowledge of an elder. Idly, Percy imagined that Annabeth would be that type of princess. "Her carriage has arrived," Annabeth said in a professional tone. At once her hand shot out to Percy's arms and discreetly dragged him to meet the princess. "Don't look so miserable, Percy," Annabeth said lowly, a hint of amusement in her voice. Percy grinned widely at her. "I'm not," he insisted. She flipped up an eyebrow but didn't say more. The first thing that Percy saw exiting the carriage door was Princess Hazel's curly brown hair. They were much less frizzy than Annabeth's curls, but they were full and had bigger curls. "Princess Hazel?" Annabeth said, bowing. The princess smiled at her. "You don't need to bow," she said kindly. Annabeth didn't reply, but she smiled nonetheless. Percy felt himself frown. Of course, Annabeth stuck with the olden rules of bowing in front of every royal you meet. Annabeth shot him a look that said, "Do your prince thing." He reached out and gently took the princess's hand. "Give me a light kiss on the knuckles." "Princess Hazel, thank you for coming all this way. I am Prince Percy," he said with a smile, but inwardly cringed at the royal speech he had to use. "It is very nice to meet you too," Hazel said, blushing a bit. Annabeth wordlessly nodded and motioned for them to begin walking, giving slight directions to Percy as they walked. "You have a beautiful castle," Hazel commented, looking around. "Thank you," Percy said, not sure what else to say. Annabeth pushed open a door for them, and the room they entered was one he had never been in before. Perhaps he had been sometime when he was a child, but Annabeth had certainly decked it out, making it look new and different from the rest of the castle. "Wow! I have never before seen these types of gems!" Hazel cried in excitement. She shot forward to a table where Percy now noted that there were gemstones and crystals on. "They are beautiful!" Hazel picked up one to examine it. Annabeth nodded from the far corner. "These are rare gemstones only found in the depths of our oceans and seas," Annabeth said. Oh, that made sense. Hazel's kingdom had a huge focus on minerals and gems. If Percy's kingdom had gems to offer, it would make King Hades more willing to form an alliance and marriage. Percy wanted to slam his head on the wall because, then again, not only was love a factor here, also power. Power and alliances was also at play. A sharp but quick pain shot through Percy's arm, and soundlessly he jumped and looked to his left to find Annabeth with an amused expression on her face. "Go talk to her. Don't be all awkward," she said, pushing him slightly. Percy stuck out his tongue at her. Hazel was exploring the crystal set out on the table with joy. Percy walked over and opened his mouth to try and start a conversation, but he couldn't think of anything. It was just, well, awkward, to say the least. "So, you like crystals?" he said, leaning over her shoulder slightly. He wanted to curse himself for being an idiot. Of course she did. It was just only one of the biggest parts of her kingdom's history. Hazel nodded excitedly at him and inspected more of the purple crystals that he was sure Annabeth knew the name of. How she managed to remember so many words was beyond him. Admittedly, Percy was never good at not making things awkward. As much as magazines like to portray him as a smooth-talking, young, suave prince, Annabeth never let him forget that he was the most awkward human on the planet. At the very least, he knew how to ask questions that got other people talking. This gave him more time to look like a normal person rather than the blubbering mess he normally was when Annabeth wasn't by his side. "Can you tell me about this crystal?" Percy asked. Hazel's eyes seemed to brighten with the light of 1,000 stars. "Oh yes! It grows in medium clusters of 4. They're neat little things. They grow very quickly, but in sparse areas. I can't believe your royal advisor was able to track them down," she said, smiling at the blue crystal in hand. Percy nodded. "Yeah, she can do everything if she puts her mind to it," he said with a fond smile. Hazel smiled back at him but didn't say much more. It was starting to get awkward. Again. "So, what do you like to do normally?" "I like to walk around my garden a lot. I love all the pretty flowers there. A lot of wildflowers grow really big without any help. We have very rich soil back at home." "That is very nice." "It is. Sometimes I like to talk to the friends I've made around the castle. Like Frank. He's one of the animal keepers," Hazel said. Her smile grew tenfold when saying Frank's name. Clearly, he was special to her. "Frank?" Percy questioned. She blushed. "Yeah. He is a very nice boy," she admitted. She looked away from him, and with an almost wistful smile. "Tell me about him," Percy said kindly. Hazel's cheeks flushed pink. Oh, Frank, he's just the sweetest person on earth," she started with excitement in her voice. "He's just so good with the animals, and I don't know how, but it's like he's one of them. And he's just so thoughtful and nice. We spend hours upon hours talking." Quickly, Hazel cut herself off. She looked at him with widened eyes. "Sorry," she said, brushing her hair back. "I was rambling, wasn't I?" Percy shook his head and smiled nicely at her. "It's okay. You seem to really like him," he said. Okay. It was quite clear that they were not compatible in a romantic standpoint. She was sweet, but there wasn't a connection or really meaningful things to talk about. Hazel bit her lip and shyly looked up at him, setting down the pretty rocks on the table. "Yeah, I do," she admitted in a quietish voice. A wide grin sprouted on Percy's face. "Then you should be with him, not me, a random prince you don't even have much chemistry with." His face went red when he realized what he had said. I mean, like, not in a bad way. You're really nice and great. It's just like we don't have a, he continued to stumble over his words, getting flustered and more flustered by the second. Hazel laughed a bit. "No, I understand, and I'm not offended at all. It's very nice to meet you at the very least," she said. The girl sighed and looked down. I really like him, and I think he likes me too, but he's not royal, and you know the whole prince, princess, and non-royal marriage thing, don't you?" Her big brown eyes looked at him like a puppy dog. Percy nodded. "So, I'm just worried about that." Percy understood that. Completely. But he also believed that happiness should come first, especially in a lifelong marriage. "I do. I understand that. I still think you should tell him. Maybe marry him if you want. Happiness is more important than just some old rule people came up with years and years and decades and centuries ago, isn't it? It's your marriage. You have the right to decide who it's with," he encouraged her. "Really?" Hazel asked him. Percy nodded. 100%. If he makes you happy, if he's the one that makes you smile and laugh, then why choose someone who doesn't make you feel special? Percy pointed out. Hazel nodded thoughtfully. I guess you're right, she said decidedly. I'll tell my father tonight. Percy nudged her shoulder playfully. Atta girl, he said with joy. She giggled a bit. I guess it's also a good thing that I'm not next to rule. I don't need an heir, my sister will have one. She said that thoughtfully. At that, Hazel brushed off her dress, and Percy took that as a sign to leave. After all, it had been only a couple of hours since she had arrived, and even if they weren't going to be engaged by the end of the day, Percy was sure that Hazel would make a wonderful and sweet friend. He politely led her down to the palace entrance and back into her carriage. Like a gentleman, he kissed her hand goodbye and kindly told her to come any time she pleased. Hazel was a kind soul who would always be welcome. Thank you, Percy, she said with a smile, picking up her skirt to get into her carriage. I hope the same luck for you. It's nice to know I'm not the only one, she said with a bright smile. What? Huh? Percy's eyebrows scrunched together and his head cocked to the side in confusion. That really confused Percy. What are you talking about? He asked her. At that, Hazel joined in his confusion. Aren't you in love with your royal advisor, Annabeth? She asked. Percy shook his head. No. Really? He nodded at that. Hazel hummed. Oh, well, dear me. Sorry for thinking that, she apologized. He waved it off. It's fine, he said. Hazel's eyes flickered to the palace entryway. That was where Annabeth was at, babbling on the phone and scratching down stuff for his schedules and other royal duties he had yet to understand how to do. But you're gonna have to learn how to do them. Then your future queen will help you. Not Annabeth, a little voice nagged in his brain. It took a lot of effort for Percy not to scowl at that voice. I'm sorry. I just assumed it looks so much like true love to me, Hazel said with a light smile gracing her face. She looked towards Annabeth in the far distance, and then back to him. If there is something, I really hope it works for you two. You're right. Happiness should always come first, and I think you'd be really happy together, she said. Percy felt like his mind had just exploded. What? He was not in love with Annabeth. No, not at all. She was his best friend for years and years, since they were like literally 12. He wasn't in love with her. That'd be silly and cliche. Thank you for the time, though. It was really fun. With that, Hazel waved out the window and away. Percy waved back, watching her leave, but the words she said stuck in his mind. He wasn't in love with Annabeth. She certainly didn't love him in that way. Annabeth was smart and funny, always on top of her work, courageous and dangerous because she could always make a plan, and whatever it was, no matter how crazy it seemed to be, it would work. No way were they evenly matched. Percy was a confused, still kiddish 18-year-old prince who still depended on his best friend for way too much and was still a baby to his mother. Not that the latter would ever change, but perhaps the former wouldn't either. Percy, he was a mess all of the time. And Annabeth was always perfectly put together. He was chaotic and had way too many not thought out ideas that he just did anyways. She was cool and composed and thought everything she did through in her entire life. Everything in her life was just thinking and planning. It all worked as it should. There was no way they were contenders for romantic partners in each other. A light but effective smack in the head woke Percy up from his reverie. Blinking, he saw Annabeth at his side, shaking her head and clicking her tongue in a disappointed manner. Next, princess, she muttered under her breath, jotting something down in the gray notebook she had in her hands. Percy looked at her in the light. Another reason she could never be in love with him. She was much too pretty for him. From an objective standpoint, that is. Percy knew he wasn't bad looking, but Annabeth looked like an angel at almost all the times of day. Like a beautiful but deadly angel, that is. Objective! Percy said in his mind. Yes. There was no way that Hazel was right. There was no romance between them, considering the different levels that he and Annabeth were on. There wouldn't ever be, at least on her part. Or his. Idly, just as quickly as the thought came, Percy smacked it away. He wondered if he could ever fall in love with her. No. He was not going to entertain that question. That would not be a good idea. Okay, come on. You have fittings to do and I have PR events to do, Annabeth said, dragging him into the castle by his shirt sleeves. But I don't want to, he whined like a kid. She rolled her eyes but smiled fondly. Too bad, Seaweed Brain. Or do you want to do that essay on royal attire history? She asked him. Percy immediately shut up. Annabeth laughed. Yeah, I thought so.